Hello, my name is Elizabeth Watts Bromery, and I am a dual enrollment English professor at Broward County Public Schools. I have been teaching for 33 years, and I want to talk to you today about my experience teaching in the global pandemic. I go back to March 2020, and since January of that year, I had my very first intern, student teacher. And we were going into spring break in March. And right when we went into spring break, it was, hello, from the district office, we are closing. And we'll let you know when we can reopen. And then after spring break, we were told that we would be going remote. We are very fortunate in my school district. We basically have access to all kinds of technology resources. And so what the district did was distribute laptops to students at the different schools. So for instance, at my school, parents and students at my school could come in and check out a district laptop. Once the students at our school had the equipment that they needed, it was open to anyone at a Broward County Public School. That person could come in and sign out a laptop. The district also worked with a local internet service provider to provide reduced rates for internet access at home. And so for the rest of the school year in 2020, we learned on our learning management system, which is Canvas. We did not have live classes. And so for me, even though my student teacher's internship was cut short, she still helped me. She worked with research students and helped mentor. I was also teaching English 2 honors at the time. And so for me, there was this hope that, okay, we're going into summer, and when we go back in August, we will be reopening fully in person. I'll have my students back. And I was really looking forward to that. And then, no, we did not reopen. At this point, in August of 2020, we were told, now you will be teaching live, synchronous lessons with the students on Microsoft Teams. So we didn't realize that we always had access to Microsoft, but it wasn't necessary until that point in August of 2020. So I had to learn Microsoft Teams. We received professional development from our school district, even at our school, best practices. We worked together in our departments. People talked about things that they were going to do, but we were all at home, everyone, students, teachers, everyone was at home. And so I was teaching at that point PreAP English 2. Our school is a pilot for PreAP in our school district. And so I was teaching on Microsoft Teams, and I learned that I needed to find a way to give each one of my pre-English 2 classes the same thing. And so I worked with my quote unquote neighbor who taught PreAP English 1. And we said, you know, maybe we need to start pre-recording lessons. And I was very fortunate that I had the resources and lessons and distance learning presentations from the College Board that I could adapt for PreAP English 2. And so I tried it the first time. I recorded one lesson, and then I went through that lesson. I would watch the video with the students, and then I would stop at salient points, and we would have our interaction. The students would turn on their cameras. They could note their answers in the chat. We would debrief. And that was great. And then I also started doing that with my advanced placement research students. And in AP research, students have to design and conduct their own research studies, write an academic paper of 4,000 to 5,000 words, and actually defend their research. And so in October of 2020, we were told teachers will be going back to campus. And then in a couple of weeks, students will have the option to come back to campus or to continue learning at home on Teams. So now I'm back in my classroom. I'm excited because students have the option to come back. But at this time, we had some students on campus, but most students continue to learn at home on Microsoft Teams. So in an attempt to replicate or try to recreate as much as possible that connection with teachers and students, we were given access to cameras. So I have a camera in my room that shows me, shows the other students, and I can actually teach that lesson to the students in the room with me while also teaching at home. I had to learn something new again while still navigating Teams. And so I decided, since I was going to continue working with my learning management system, we use Canvas, I would start doing overview videos for each week's module. That way I could ensure that each class of students would receive the same information. I started teaching live more rather than pre-recording lessons. So I get to the point where we're going into winter break, and I learn that the dual enrollment English professor on our campus is retiring. And Dr. Bromery, we would like for you to take over her schedule. So not only was I getting used to being back on campus, teaching students in the room with me, using the camera in my room, and students at home on Microsoft Teams, but I have to work with a new group of students in different courses, teaching for Broward College on my high school campus. So we come back in January. I have sections of freshman composition 2, working with seniors who I did not know. And then I have sections of introduction to late American literature, 1900 to the present, with 11th grade students, some of whom had been my students in 10th grade. And so I will talk about what I did in my American literature course. When I taught English 2 honors to some of the students in 10th grade, we did small group work. I like to use project-based learning because I find I can scaffold instruction by providing modeling, guided practice, having the students work with independent practice in their small groups, and then coming back to debrief, provide feedback, and then help students fill gaps in their comprehension. And so I was using Microsoft Teams. I had some students in class with me and some students at home learning through Microsoft Teams. And so I decided to use either Microsoft Teams breakout rooms or Microsoft Teams small group channels. The students were grouped using data that I have from a diagnostic I did at the beginning of the semester. And so they started, we would go through the first part of the lesson. Let's say we were working with a particular poem by Emily Dickinson. And I said, how am I going to bridge this and make this connection? Because I'm not sure how much explicit instruction students receive on poetry. Some students have a fear of poetry. And so I like to teach poetry like prose. I tell students, start by finding the sentences and then read at the sentence level and make meaning that way, because the sentence is the smallest unit of meaning in poetry. So I would have video support or resource, let's say on Emily Dickinson, then we would talk about one of her poems and interpret it together. And then I would give students 5 poems, each group, 5 poems, 5 different poems by Emily Dickinson. They had to read through those poems, discuss them, and choose their favorite that they wanted to study together. I gave students a framework. One of the ones I really like is called How to Make a Poem Fit from the College Board. And so when students read a poem, they have to focus on the facts of the poem. They have to look at literary techniques, the interpretation of the poem, and then they have to talk about the central message or theme for the poem. So students brought in their favorite poems and they had to share them and talk about them and the central message and how the songwriter communicated that message, the techniques he used. Then we talked about Emily Dickinson's poetry. Like I said, we went through and interpreted one of her poems, and then I gave each group 5 poems by Emily Dickinson. They had to read, discuss, and then choose their favorite to interpret. And then to bring things up to date while the students were in their breakout rooms or Microsoft Teams small group channels, they had to create a social media post with one image about a central idea they found in the poem. They had to discuss in writing her techniques for communicating meaning in the poem. And then they had to look at the connection between theme and technique and come up with their own theme statement for their selected poem by Emily Dickinson. And then to bring that up to date, they had to identify a song that related to their poem and provide their rationale. And then I would check on the groups, we would come back together, each group would present, we would debrief, students could note their learning in the chat, we would take questions, and then we would get together and have students summarize. I'd say, okay, in one sentence, I want you to tell me in the chat, or when we debrief, you can open your mic, give me a 1-sentence summary of what you learned today and one question or observation you have. And so I always make decisions based on data. I'm trained as a researcher. So I asked the students what they thought about. I had a Google survey. They had to rank themselves on their level of proficiency with the standard that we're working with, and that has to do with explicit and implicit meaning, stated and implied meaning in a text, and citing evidence to communicate their interpretations and substantiate their interpretations rather. And they said, you know, Dr. Bromery, and some of these were students that I had in 10th grade, we really like the small groups because with the small group activities and the way we have it organized, that's the closest to replicating what we had when we were in person. And so I continue to use that. I use those techniques with my seniors, and I've integrated now coming back in person this school year and teaching dual enrollment full time. I've allowed students to integrate video into project-based learning and other modalities. I work at a school that is a magnet school for international affairs and information technology. So I like to work with students on quality checks, because one of the things that I've noticed since we haven't been together in person or on a consistent basis since March of 2020 is I noticed that sometimes students doubt themselves. And so I provide them with checklists that they can use to do quality checks on their work. And we also do peer feedback with those quality checklists and talk about revision, just to give them that time to work with a peer or peers who they've developed trust with. And as well, one of the things I've just started with my students at the beginning of class, at the beginning of the semester, we do mindfulness minutes. You can just take a moment of silent reflection, and then if you need to debrief with someone, just go in, check your own grades, and then talk with a partner about how you can action plan so that you can improve. So for me, I have found that it's important for me to engage with my professional learning community, whether it be the person next door, in my department, if I want to just have a phone call or a Microsoft Teams web conference with a colleague in another school, that helps so I know I am not alone, I am not isolated, and that we are all in this pandemic together, we're all adjusting. And so I try to meet students where they are, provide them with the time and the flexibility and the care to work towards being persons of excellence. And so that's not only producing quality work, identifying your areas for improvement and your areas of strength so that you can help others, but also to understand that social emotional wellness is important in this process. Thank you.